Chinese auto manufacturers are coming. They're coming in fast, they're coming in hot, and they're here to steal your lunch. But it's not all good news. Apparently, there are some cracks showing up in the brilliantly painted facade. And I'm joined by Herbert from Brighter. We're going to have a quick conversation about Chinese automakers and how the whole thing works. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. How are you today, Herbert?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I love having these conversations with you. And China's a big one. We'd like to do deeper information research on this because they're important. I think they will be the most important thing, as Elon said, right? It will be Tesla number one, and the next 9 automakers is going to be Chinese. It's very likely.
At this point, I don't see any other possible outcome because everyone outside of China feels like they're really holding back. But that doesn't mean everything is smooth sailing in the Far East. Great Wall Motors closes European headquarters in Munich. The Chinese manufacturer has scaled back its expansion plans. However, nothing will change for customers and dealers for the time being. So Great Wall Motors makes a lot of different vehicles. They announced on my birthday that a request confirming that's happening. So they've got Great Wall Motors makes the Aura, the Funky Cat, the O3. And why do you think they're struggling in Europe? Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I mean, I think they're struggling. I think the best way to describe this is that as I've interviewed a number of experts who are actually on the ground in China, they all say the same thing. It's a bloodbath in China. So Chinese government has absolutely incentivized electric vehicles. They've put penalties for gas cars. They've done so early, and they are so far ahead in both battery electric vehicles, pure electric vehicles, as well as hybrids. But they are so far ahead of everyone else. I mean, I've heard a stat that they might be at 50% of all new car sales will be some sort of electric component to it. And then I think we're at 40%, right? Getting close to 40% are battery electric. So what that has done is it's created hundreds and hundreds of automakers pop out and compete with each other. It's a bloodbath. Many of them are struggling, and they're all just trying to get a foothold into the space. And of course, BYD is still very much the leader. So there's going to be kind of these scenarios where some of these car companies are struggling back at home before they can actually consider getting a foothold and getting out. That's what I would anticipate is actually what's happening here, or that's what I would guess is what's happening.
I think you're right. Now, there was a neat study that came up that said Germans warm to electric cars from China.
Yeah.
And this showed that last year it was 22% had a favorable opinion. It's almost doubled to 37%. So that's a big deal. Now, what do you think the most popular Chinese car? Go ahead. I think you're going the same place I am.
The reason why, again, from just people that I've been interviewing are saying is that so when you're in China and you're an electric car maker in China, you are trying to sell to the low end market. And that's where that's absolutely what you're trying to do. But when you try to go to Europe and then try to have your first land grab to try to get out there and spot to get started, they are coming out with premium cars. They're trying to make their cars to not be seen as a low cost cheap car. They need to be seen as premium, as equivalent to a BMW, right? High quality, lots of features. And so they have a very different approach, and that's why in Europe that's the kind of car that they're trying to promote.
So yes, they are not appreciably cheaper than the competition. They're not radically cheaper. They're good cars at good prices, and that creates a struggle. But I think part of the reason the reputation of Chinese cars has improved so much over the last year, one reason they'd said in the article was that just brand recognition is up. People have now heard of BYD and Polestar and MG. But the other reason is
they've always known about MG. That's their strategy.
Not necessarily outside of England.
German. Yeah. Okay, but you know what I mean? Like the strategy
Yes.
that the Chinese have done, some of them, which is brilliant, is buy the old brands. They're well-known brands, and people don't realize Volvo is actually a Chinese company now, right?
Right.
Owned by SAIC, and yet they've got the name Volvo. They've got MG. They've got these names, and so that's actually the most brilliant approach. And eventually, that's what we're going to see. I think we're going to see some of these great brands fall to the wayside, bought by other companies, most likely by Chinese.
Right. And it's worked for other companies as well, in other industries. I mean, what do you think the most common Chinese car in Asia, in Europe is? It's the,
Which
it's the
brand
Tesla
is?
Model 3.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I
Yeah.
got you. Got
By
good
far, the
point.
most popular
Good
Chinese
point.
electric car is the Tesla Model 3.
So
And
good.
it's got a fantastic reputation. It's got performance, it's got features, it's got all kinds of goodies. And
So brilliant.
that absolutely helps with brand perception because no one is under the illusion that it's made in America or made in
Gotcha.
Germany.
Yes,
They know where it's
they
from and
know.
it's a good car. And that
That is so
helps.
smart.
It really is. It's like the way the iPhone raised the profile of China as a manufacturer
Yeah.
because it doesn't have a Chinese name on it.
And they know the quality can be as good as the iPhone, as good as a Tesla. They're the ones that actually make. Now, in the case, that's such a great point you just made there. The Tesla Model 3 comes from Giga Shanghai, and it's incredible quality. If they can make that, why can't other car makers in China do the same quality eventually, right? They'll catch up.
And I know this is just anecdotal, but when we were leaving Austria, we saw so many car carriers stuffed with Model 3s heading
Yeah.
the other direction. We must have seen a dozen of them. Now, that obviously doesn't indicate strong or weak sales necessarily, but we saw a whole lot of them. And
Mhm.
the Model 3 refresh over there is very popular. It's what Jan drives. He was one of the first to get one. And he did so in part because they gave him his $1,000 discount for having a Cybertruck reservation. And there
Mhm.
was the German subsidy had just ended. So Tesla said, until the end of the year, we'll just give you that as a discount. And he was afraid that any day there could be new import tariffs on Chinese made goods, which would include the Model 3. Now,
Gotcha.
there is the
Makes
question
sense.
of, are you worried about privacy? Are Chinese cars
Mhm.
going to steal your data?
Mhm.
76% of young Americans would not care,
Mhm.
despite the strong interest. Yeah, two-thirds say, I don't care if they have my data. US tech firms, I would say, have raised us to believe that our data is not ours. That's something that the tech companies have been big on all along is just give us your data. You are my product. Just accept it or don't do it. And if China really wants to steal our data, they'll get it from TikTok or Temu
Exactly.
or
Yep.
or just purchase it on the open market. So while this could be a legit concern, it is not a held concern. People are not worried about it. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about it either. Of course, you should be very concerned about it. You should be thinking about it. But I think that the US government should do what the Chinese government is doing, right? There should be some laws and regulations and make sure that if you are a Chinese automaker trying to sell your car in the United States, tell us what's going to happen to the data. It's Tesla had to go through 4 different regulations to be able to sell their or to in the future sell their robotaxi in China. They're capturing data. They've got 8 cameras, and so you saw some Chinese very sensitive locations, airports, military. They said no Teslas allowed here. Then the government in China said no, that's okay now, because Tesla passed 4 regulations, things like the in-cabin camera, what it's looking at, what it's tracking, cannot leave the car. The data that is being captured by the car has to be in a data center in China, and that cannot leave the country. And then I think most recently they said there's certain data that will let you to leave the country, like training data for robotaxi, as long as it's very generic, it's very important, it's not specific to China, and so they're very careful. By the way, I just heard this, I just learned this, I thought it was very interesting. Did you know that China, if you look up the map of China and trying to understand like the city streets and all that, it is not correct. Like they
Oh,
purposely, the Chinese satellites purposely change up what you're looking at because they don't want other, again, for military purposes and other things like that. So it's like, they randomly change certain streets and where things go. And they do that. I did not realize this, but it was very interesting. Um, so you have to be careful. Absolutely be very, very vigilant about this. This is, it can lead to war, it can lead to espionage and those kind of things. But if other countries allow US to go in there, then you need to allow China, and then you just have to have your restrictions.
Absolutely correct. I agree on all points. And you and don't have I don't have a privacy concern from China because I'm not engaged in any practice that China would have any interest in, but that is not true of everyone. But again, it's just that we've been set up to believe that this is how data works. The last part I wanted to cover was China may devote about $830 million to support all solid state battery R&D. According to a report, 6 companies, including all the usual suspects, may receive basic government R&D support, according to China Daily. Solid state, do you think it's coming?
I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of invention, progress, technology leaps for batteries. It's mind-boggling to to people realize that gas cars, combustion cars, has been around for 100 years, and I think that they've pretty well hit their limit of how much more improvement they can have with that. Basically, you have a combustion engine that goes, and then you're trying to make a piston move. But with batteries, we're just at the beginning. There's going to be so many new inventions. The trick is, and we're hearing it all the time from the labs, and I think Elon had said this. The trick is, it's one thing to actually show it in the lab, it's another thing to actually do mass production and scale. So there's a combination of both, invention of, oh, hey, we have this new solid state battery that can charge in 15 minutes, and then actually be able to do that at scale in a battery, in a factory, and produce it at scale and actually be production. But it's going to happen, and there's just no doubt that it's like, I don't know what the name is, but there's something similar to the Moore's law, where
Mm.
every certain number of years the technology will just continue to improve. So there's no doubt in my mind this is going to happen, and some of them will make it through.
You're right that internal combustion has had 100 years to get to perfection, and it is very, very close. If you can eke out another 1 or 2%, you're going to get paid handsomely for it. But with batteries, we are just in the infancy. And if you look at like what Tesla's doing, the 4680 already
Yeah,
has a dry
right. Cathode.
cathode and soon, hopefully, a dry electrode. And they're moving in that direction. I would point out, though, that $830 million is not a lot of money when
It's
it
not a lot
comes
of money.
to
Yeah.
R&D. So this is just a bit of help and a low risk gamble for the government to hopefully spur a little bit of innovation. In the comments, I'd be curious to know what you guys think. Is this a lot of money? Is this a good deal? Is this a big deal? So, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? Like, subscribe, do all the usual things. And thanks, world, to my patrons who are the reason I'm able to go on these trips to meet all the people I do and to actually stay in business because it is a tough racket. You can support me on Patreon as a patron, on YouTube as a channel member, or X as a subscriber. And now we do get to actually call it X all the time because the URL changeover happened. It's no longer putting in links to Twitter, it's putting in links to X. So that's very exciting, I imagine.
I thought
So,
you were going to say thanks to the world, to Herbert, but no, you said to my Patreon.
well, I will thank a portion of the world to Herbert.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny.
Thank
I
me a
was
little bit.
in Austria. I told someone that, yeah, Herbert and I live
Yeah.
close, and they said, America close? How far? I said
So there you go.
2-3 hours away. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
not
that's not
close.
close.
That's the other side of the next country. So okay, well, yeah, okay, fair enough. So, but thank you, Herbert. I do appreciate our chats. I find
I
you
do
to
too.
be an
Thank you.
incredible resource, and I
You
cannot
are.
tell you how many people in Austria said, "I know you from Brighter with Herbert."
It's the other way around.
It's wonderful. It's great. So,
I know you from Futurosa. Thank you.
yeah, you bet. So, what did we miss? What did we misunderstand? You know what to do. Stay tuned, stay juicy. I cannot wait to hear from you, clever robots, on the next one.